Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, I'm going to go a little off piece to start things, but as a CEO, you're going to be the perfect test bed for this. Last night, woke up about 3 in the morning, and I can't be the only one that does. For sometimes you just get this random thread of thought, and then the next thing you know, you're up 2-3 hours. So when I initially left 16 years ago to go to university, Nick, which is scary to think that was 16 years ago, I was going to study business. My cousin at the time was a general manager of the Trump National Golf Course in LA. If people can remember back to 2008, that was the height of the Entourage days. So the idea of getting my degree, working out in LA, all that, like, was perfect. Kind of got halfway through and I was like, I don't know if this is quite the direction I want to head anymore. And I just sat there thinking, like, it's probably for the best because I barely scraped by calculus, Nick. In the business school at the Miami University, which my mother would have you know is different from the University of Miami. Miami University was a university before Florida was even a state. To enter the business school in your junior and senior year, you had to complete 2 years of calculus. And I sat there thinking this random thread of thought last night, like, thank God, because I barely scraped by calculus 1. There's no way I was going to make it through calculus 2. So as a CEO, Nick, being quite commercially minded, doing business deals, and I know our financial year runs May to April, so you'll be in the midst of planning for next year. How much calculus did you take, Nick?
Definitely not as much as you've talked about, and it would not help me very much at all to do that. I do reflect on that sometimes, thinking about what I studied both at high school and university, and thinking I don't use any of that. And I remember initially when I started university, I started a double degree in exercise science and business, with majors in sports and event management, which fits well. But exercise science, I was doing tests on frogs' legs and studying biochemistry. I'm like, oh, this is a waste. This is wasted on me. And so now I just watch Instagram videos that tell me how much what I should be doing to train and how the body works, and that's kind of all I need. So university was a waste for those first couple of years doing a double degree. Eventually, I skinnied down, and then I worked out that most of my business degree was just use common sense and learn some keywords, and you'll get by. And I was working full time whilst at university and balancing both, so I was sort of juggling the two. But I even did one of my accountancy exam. I forgot my calculator, and I did it without the calculator, and I still got past. I'm like, well, if I can get past the most numerical subject I was doing in the business degree without a calculator, then I think I can get through the rest of the degree pretty comfortably.
I think the one I wish, looking back on it, I paid more attention to when I was still doing business was computer sciences, because it was just all spreadsheets, and I was like, spreadsheets, dumb, who needs them, sort of thing. And it's like, actually, if I was better at Excel, like I tell all of my uni kids that I coach, like, how can I work in sports? I was like, just become really good at a particular skill set. And I use Excel as a perfect example. I was like, if you're really good at Excel, your boss will all of a sudden be like, you help me on this. And then all of a sudden it opens the door to work on projects you wouldn't have, because your boss probably doesn't know how to use Excel either. And if you can help them be good at Excel, like, it's a great tool. So that's probably the one I wish I'd paid a little bit more attention to.
I thought I was good at Excel. And then I caught up with my friend who works at the Treasury. And then he showed me what some of the Excel spreadsheets they use there. And they were like full on programs doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I'm like, okay, I will step off my high horse and just accept I know about 5% of how you can use Excel. And that was a quick learning curve for me. Now we have obviously all these AI tools that kind of do it all for us, right? I think we've started to use more and more of them just to crunch some data in those spreadsheets. So you just ask it to do it for you, and it does it. You don't have to even put in the formulas these days. So you have to trust, though, the AI tools you're using, which is a slippery slope, no doubt. Might be in the future.
Yeah, well, it's funny. You talk about not having a calculator, and I remember being much younger in elementary school. And, oh, you won't have a calculator on you when you grow up. And it's like, no, I've got an iPhone instead. Like, obviously, I wouldn't have known at the age of 8 or 10 what an iPhone was, but it does make you think about education. You can't. Teachers used to always say, you won't have a calculator, you won't have this. And it's like, well, actually, you kind of do, but it is totally different.
I had a teacher, and he was a bit of a genius, and I had him for maths for a number of years. So I did French immersion. I did all my subjects in French. He was Mauritian, and great guy, great teacher, like kept us in line, but taught us loads. He never used a calculator except to just double check his work. And he would do some crazy calculations, and he would race us on the calculator, like and using things like synthan, cos, things that are not like flexible formulas, and he would just work it out in his head. And he would almost always get it right, and it would blow me away. And that was actually sort of the spur on to actually try and not use calculator sometimes, because hey, that's pretty cool. And then found out his wife was worked in nanotechnology. So I don't know what their backgrounds were, but there was some genius in that family. I'm sure their kids probably grew up to, like, I don't know, build some sort of first AI robot, given all what they would must be talking about at home, given what we were seeing at school.
Yeah, well, let's bring it back to something we're a little bit more familiar with, although we will have a little bit of fun at the cost of one of our colleagues and the way he wrote up a particular news story. But to kick things off, Nick, you had the Sportradar New York event, ton of things in America, all these things around mergers, acquisitions. We actually, after this news story, we'll do a little breaking news announcement talking about an investment event we're going to do at Sports Pro. But there seems to just be so much movement in this space. I think kind of the first story we're going to kick off with is a new social live streaming platform called Playback, which has sort of described itself as the Twitch for sports. I suppose a little bit of background. It's led by the capital firm 776, who, if you don't know, is one of the leaders of that, is the co-founder of Reddit, also the husband of Serena Williams. I'm just going to butcher his last name, Nick, so I'll let you do it if you want to try to do it when you go on to it. But it is interesting, Nick, because we're seeing more and more of celebrities, influencers being involved. We spoke to the folks at Casa TV and what they're doing. So to see an investment from the NBA into this new platform, I think is sort of confirming some of what we know. But when someone like the NBA does it, it just sort of validates where things are headed a little bit more.
Interesting, right? So this topic, I find the whole topic around investment, which is we're launching something around investment soon, super interesting. But I find it also interesting when you hear a sports property or an athlete attached to it, to know why are they, quote unquote, investing in some of those things. But before I go down that rabbit hole, I would say Alexis Ohanian, I think is his name.
There you go.
He's quite outspoken. He gets a lot of media coverage as well. He's made a bunch of investments, as I think he's probably one of the driving forces behind Serena's empire as well. She's got a huge array of investments as well. Look, when I saw this story, I think it's interesting for a couple of reasons. Like, one is there's 22 million that's been raised. That's not bad for a startup tech company, startup tech platform. My concern, though, when I saw it is, I've seen a lot of these platforms pop up over the years. These sort of social, watch together style things pop up, and they've never been able to find their place. Interesting about this platform is that the NBA did have a pre-existing relationship with them with some rights. There was a rights agreement in place which allowed them to basically have creators broadcast and watch the games together with fans, where there was the ability to subscribe, basically like you can on Twitch. Subscribe, donate, perhaps purchase, etc. So they were trying to mirror that Twitch experience. They did a rights deal with the NBA, and there must be something good there, basically, because they've been able to back that up and get some extra funding. Now, the NBA announcing that they're investors, I think that's more of one of those things that they weren't willing to perhaps pay, or didn't have the capital to pay the level of investment for the rights that perhaps they wanted. And so the NBA took a cut of an investment in some of those in the business, basically. So some of the value they'd be bringing to the table, I'm guessing, would likely be the rights is what they're paying for that investment into the organization. 776, probably more of a traditional deal, but I'm sure there's a bit of a discount going on with Ohanian's background, contacts, etc., that they're going to be leaning into. One thing that stood out for me, though, when I've been talking to people about sort of this creator economy, this ability to monetize this and watch-alongs and so forth, and also what NFL have done with allowing some of their creators to get access to the Sunday ticket rights and broadcast on YouTube, is that I had a couple of conversations, and this has come up a couple of times now, is that there's a feeling that creators are going to slowly start trying to move away from YouTube and Twitch to get a more control of their audiences. Now, there's been a few attempts to drive them away, and normally they've come back. But yeah, and YouTube and Twitch have been very good at like dangling the carrot, making sure they're driving mass audiences, being a valuable addition to the business. But that normally leads to a much smaller cut of what they could potentially be earning if they had it on their own destination. And so this platform is basically an enabler of that. It's an enabler of basically allowing creators access to a premium piece of content. They used Gilbert Arenas was one of the creators, who's an ex NBA player. He's a bit of a media, I wouldn't call him a pundit, but an active personality.
Contributor.
Yeah, contribute to the conversation. He gets a lot of has a lot of output on social, and they've used it there, and it must have been successful in some way. So look, I think it's an interesting thing to look at for a couple of reasons. One is that whole point around, okay, the NBA is being marked as an investor. I'm skeptical how much money they put on the table versus just how much is wrapped into that rights deal. And also just that I am hearing that there's more interest from creators actively to find a different way to build out their own community on their own platforms, which is not the first time this has come up in the industry, but it seems to be becoming just talked about again.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because I can remember there's been multiple organizations we've seen come and go. It does feel, at least for me, that maybe things are at a different place than they were back then. Like I said, I mentioned the Kaza TV example in the news article. Josh Shim talks about the Manning cast, which is a perfect example of this. Granted, it's being done via ESPN. It's not driving them to necessarily a different platform. But it does feel maybe perhaps that this is maybe something a little bit more accepted. Like Nick, because I coach younger people, there's all these different things, whether it's Twitch, I think one of them's called Rumble. There's all different kinds of platforms that they're using. iSpeed, I've seen him at the unit, or the Sidemen Football Classic, has however many millions of followers, rivals Ronaldo. It does feel, I don't know, maybe it's a different time, or maybe it will be a repeat of stuff, but it seems like there's a bit more, I guess, a new behavior that's taking place, where people are more, at least the younger generation, are doing it. And I remember our friend Peter Scott, used to be at Turner Sports. I remember one of the things he talked about like 5 years ago is it's not about making new products. It's how many ways can I distribute the same product in a bunch of different ways. And I think at the time he talked about, can you have one stream that's traditional, one stream that's all gambling, one stream that's this, and just, it's almost like, how do you just take the same content you already have? And I think you made the point, the NBA, they might not have invested anything, but they've just cut off a piece of the rights exclusively for this type of distribution.
Yeah, completely. I think inevitably getting the maximum value out of content, it's pretty tried and tested that you can't get the maximum value if you just have a ring-fenced single destination, because there's just too many people being lost in that journey. So if this becomes a nice extension for them to have a different and unique experience to the other places that they might also be distributing that content, then that's obviously a huge win for all parties who are involved. Playback get some good financial returns, probably taking a cut of all those donations and subscriptions that the creators are getting, and probably that's another place that they can build a relationship with fans. So yeah, look, I think it's just an interesting sign to see more investment coming into these types of platforms again.
So speaking of investment, one that is a little bit more firmly established in the space is FloSports. They have now raised another $100 million. And one of the things that's interesting, and you've got a post on LinkedIn, if anybody wants to go read it, go have a look. You can add your thoughts to that as well. But one of the interesting things about it, Nick, is $100 million is no small fee, but FloSports has also been around. Those that aren't familiar with FloSports, I guess the way I would describe it is they almost became a platform for those that would have not gotten a traditional broadcast deal. Lots of high school sports as well, things like wrestling, volleyball, sports, like I said, they just aren't that tier one, but it gave them a home. I think Tony Stewart, former NASCAR racer, is one of the investors, or he's involved somewhere, and there's some lower levels of motorsports that's on there, but it's basically a place to stream for sports that don't have that traditional home in a broadcast perspective, but they're building, it feels like, a lot of momentum. And I also, Nick, they're also one of those businesses, almost reminds me of BAM Tech a little bit, where I know their streaming capabilities are also, something that they're trying to develop and sell as a white label product to other people as well. But another big investment. So I guess, Nick, a couple things on that. One is, why is it interesting in terms of who's invested? But then also, as they keep raising money, are they someone that we think could potentially not just be this player that sits at that lower tier level?
Mm. Well, the first thing on the first question about who's invested, which I think is quite interesting, it's to look at the fact you've got your Warner Brothers Discovery there, you've got Causeway Media Partners, but interestingly, in this funding round, one of the lead investors has been Dream Sports. Now, Dream Sports won't be a familiar name to a lot of people, particularly in the US. Probably not in the UK either, and actually in a lot of other markets, they wouldn't have a clue who they are. But they are one of the biggest. I think they're one of the biggest sports digital players in India, where they have something like, I think the numbers were like 230 million fantasy players on their platform. They've got 150 million registered users on their digital platform fan code, which is 150 million. Think about that. That's a pretty significant number. And they have a whole host of rights on those platforms in India and have grown from strength to strength over the last few years. So to see an Indian market major player now investing into one of the most, I guess, lucrative markets in the US is not something we've seen a lot of before. And I just wonder if it is a sign of things to come. Will we start to see just more and more of those successful organizations in India start to divest their money into other markets like the UK, like the US, because they've either got a proven formula or have basically cash to spend because they've been so successful and growing in that market?
Yeah, like I said, the other part of this, and I'd be curious to know about it as well, is as you mentioned, Dream Sports. They do have the fantasy sports things. They are platform builders, and maybe it's because I know Brian Reinhardt, who is at FloSports, who used to be at Warner Brothers Discovery. Maybe that's how I knew them, met them. They do talk quite a bit about their technology. So I think that's the other part about Dream Sports as well, is like, as you mentioned, they do have some rights, but they also are a bit of a technology player as well.
Yeah, and no doubt they've got some at least expertise, if not technical capabilities and technology to bring to the table to perhaps build out basically a more comprehensive digital offering than being a live events platform. You know, let's put it in context. In 2024, Flow Sports had more than 40,000 live sporting events on the platform for the year. That takes a lot of work, even if it's not the tier one sports properties to deliver that and deliver it well. So they've clearly got a huge breadth of content and rights that they've brought into the business. You're talking collegiate sports, NASCAR, Tour de France, a bunch of NCAA conferences at a minimum, which is probably where that scale comes from in the US. And look, I think I don't know where Flow Sports kind of gets to. It could be one of those businesses that just keeps growing and keeps building their business. It feels inevitable that they're one of those companies that probably grow to a scale which will be appealing for someone to acquire and build into the existing business. You could see, or I could see again, I keep saying, I talk about these guys probably too much, but they're just so active, is you could easily see DAZN be someone that would like, let's take this business and connect it with the rest of our company. All of a sudden we've got a massive US footprint at not a huge price point, depending on what that 100 million raise equates to from the total scale and size of the business. So look, I think it's an interesting business to follow for everyone. They are clearly, they've made claims that they're going to be looking to invest more heavily in technical capabilities, but also in rights. So will they start to apply that capital and deploy that capital to invest into some more major sports rights? I struggle to think them going up to the top tier anytime soon, but could they start just picking up a few interesting sets of rides in that tier 3 range that could move some audiences? I think it's possible.
Well, I think there's a couple of interesting things there. One is the DAZN angle, which we're not going to talk about today, but I'm going to now bring it up. You know, they've just signed a deal with the UFL, the newest American football disruptor league, which again just goes to strengthen DAZN's case of like, let's just be the home of football internationally. Obviously, the NFL is going to have all its deals domestically, but pretty much outside of that, we've seen DAZN make moves with the NFL Game Pass acquisition. They've also got, we talked about it a while back, the European League of Football. They've picked up now the UFL. I would love to see them maybe pick up something college football, but it does make sense where you're saying some of the things DAZN have done from an acquisition product or perspective would align with where FloSports is really strong at. And I agree with you. I don't think FloSports is all of a sudden going to start going for major rights. What I'd be curious about is at the moment, they are pretty much exclusively US focused. And it's not like tier 2 and tier 3 sports only exist in America. There's plenty lower tier rugby, lower tier football across Europe or other markets I'd be curious to know if maybe that's where they potentially expand, given they're so heavily focused there. So I think to your point, there's a lot of places it seems really interesting. It seems like it fits. I'm curious to see as well where that further 100 million gets invested. Just there's a lot of potential angles it could go.
Yeah, look on FloSports platform. They've also got a host of basically like sports dedicated channels on the platform. So you've got Flow Swimming. You've got what else have you got there? You've got Flow FC, Flow Marching, Flow Bikes, Flow Track. They're trying to create these kind of channels that we do know there's some interest in the market and would easily be transferable to mop up some of those more, let's say, niche rights that are largely being lost, or those tier 2 or tier 3 sports properties are going, do we go at it ourselves and create our own platform? Do we publish on YouTube? Or is someone else going to help us scale and reach out to bigger audiences here? So, look, the door's ajar. It's just, I think we've always seen that for someone from the US to grow outside of the US, it's a grind. It's a lot harder than they think. You've got to strike a lot of deals. It takes a lot of marketing effort to grow and scale. I've talked to a couple of people who are doing that now, and they're getting there, but it's not something you can flip overnight. You don't have instant access to 320 million or whatever the population of the US is because of all the complexities around rights and languages, etc., and culture. So it takes time to build in any of those markets if you want to grow and scale, but it's doable.
Yeah. So before we switch gears, Nick, to another story, we did mention we'll do a little breaking news, I suppose. I don't know if breaking news is fully appropriate, but I also don't know how much it's been spoken about externally. But we've got the CEO on board, so if you want to do it, we can do it. But we're talking about all this sports investment. We're going to launch a sports investment then. I don't know if it's Sports Pro Investment, what the title is. It might still be working, but we are going to do something this summer. So maybe just give everyone a little bit of an idea on that.
Yeah, sure thing. We are launching an event, and it's going to be in July, so in the summer, and it's going to be the Sports Pro Investment Summit is the name and positioning of it. What we're seeing is everyone is interested in the topic from a thematic perspective. Actually, we're just seeing the whole notion of investment filters all corners of the industry. Now into media, seeing it more and more prominent, not just at the top end, but at lower tiers. There's the startup economy, but then there's also all these major investments in teams and leagues right across the world. So it felt inevitable for us to make a move like this and really have something that is dedicated solely and wholly to the investment space, both to help basically buy side, sell side investors to understand how to approach things. If they're a sports team, league, if you're a commercial organization in sports, how do you approach that marketplace? And likewise, if you're someone who's looking to invest, how do you know where to spend your money, where to invest accordingly, and who to work with? Because that also is just as important as finding an interesting property or proposition to invest in. So we're launching that. We're going to have our first one in London in July. I haven't told the team this too much, but we are going to also look to have something in the US as well, and really double down on this, and as well as probably cover it more from a content perspective. So we're really excited to double down on this space, and it's also exciting for me to see more of these deals happening in the media landscape, because that's obviously an area we do spend a lot of time talking about.
Well, don't you worry, Nick, because I'm coming right in with another story about it. So one of the stories that you raised that you're quite interested in is Sportradar coming into an agreement to acquire IMG Arena from Endeavor, which is having its own $13 billion deal elsewhere. But this one's quite interesting in the sense of, this deal is not quite worth $13 billion, but it is a relationship with IMG Arena's portfolio, which, if stats tell me correctly, they've got over 70 rights or relations with over 70 rights holders. They cover approximately 39,000 official data events through 30,000 streaming events across 14 global sports. Wimbledon, US Open, Roland Garros, MLS, EuroLeague basketball, some PGA Tour. There's quite a bit in there, Nick. And there's several layers with which we're going to go into this, but just why initially did this story stick out to you?
Well, it stood out, I think, to everyone for a couple of reasons. And in fact, it took me a little while to realize I had to do a double take or a triple take when I first saw the headline. And the headline is that Sportradar are being paid to take the IMG Arena business. They're being paid about 125 million for the business, and then another 100 million for some of the rights commitments. That is yeah, you've got to think about that. So they're getting paid to take those rights. And that's caught a lot of people off guard. Like, wow, we thought the betting industry was booming. All of a sudden, this company is now shutting down or handing over its basically business to the leading player in the market. Has the bubble burst? And look, I think that's a bit of an overreaction here. There's a few things going on, right? So taking a step back, what is IMG Arena first? But IMG Arena is one of those businesses that sits alongside what Sportradar and Genius Sports have basically been built on, and to some extent Perform, which is a lot to do with the betting industry, betting rights, data rights, and also some broadcast rights explicitly for betting platforms. So for context, they would mainly be selling things like betting simulcasts. So basically, that would incorporate a much smaller screen size. It would be basically that the rights owner would have a carved out set of rights, which would be so carved out that the broadcasters who are doing the main deals would not be too worried about how carved out this would be. To give you to put some perspective or to explain that better, is they would have, say, the live stream. It would be a low latency broadcast. There would be a restriction on the bit rate, so the quality of the broadcast. There would be a restriction on the screen size of that broadcast, and there would be other constraints, basically to ensure that the quality of what was being broadcast on these betting platforms would never really push anyone who wants to watch the live experience just organically from, say, a traditional broadcaster into a betting space. But this little niche became quite lucrative. They also basically had effectively a trading platform they created. So that's basically what Sportradar, Genius Sports, and companies like IMG Arena do, is they basically power the bulk of the betting platforms in the world. So some of them you'll see, they are just, when you see these platforms in various different markets, all they are, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they are just built on they're white labeled, and they could be marketed by anyone. Anyone wants to launch a platform, if they get the license, they could be launched, and it's just going to be powered by one of these organizations' engines. Now, the complex bit, and the reason this sale has sort of had to happen, is the value of those rights became more and more lucrative, right? As betting grew, you started to see the fight for some of the rights to these betting simulcasts, and maybe even the rights to have all the data and all the betting options available became quite lucrative and quite competitive. So these organizations were bidding for each other. We started to see in the US a couple of situations where the NFL and I think the NBA and maybe even MLB got equity stakes in some of those partnerships in those data betting providers. So for someone like IMG Arena, who's grown quite successfully, from what I understand, was quite profitable for a while, they had to make some bets to continue to grow, make some commitments on some rights deals, and maybe some of those rights deals were paying too much of a premium, weren't able to get some of those returns, to put a bit of pressure on. And the business grew at a pretty incredible rate, right? So they grew the business really big. But the market got competitive. So basically, what am I trying to get to here? I'm trying to get to so why all this has happened. So fast forward to now, they're still turning over a lot of revenue, but behind the scenes, they were acquired, or they're a part of the Endeavor business. And you pointed out before that Endeavor, $13 billion valuation. People who have followed the Endeavor business, that's where IMG was part of that. That's Ari Emanuel. There's a modeling business. There's an agency business. There's the Endeavor streaming business. There's all sorts of other pieces of this. They basically, how would I describe it? They basically put all these together, acted almost like a bit of a VC, putting all these businesses together and built a super sports business, right? With all these different acquisitions they've got. And one of the parts they bought was IMG Arena to really go after the betting spot, and OpenBet, which was basically another platform-based offering in this market. So bear with me, I'm getting there. So Endeavor now are up for sale. They basically, I think, have been gone private to Silver Lake for that valuation of $13 billion. But for those parts of the business that aren't as profitable, as additive to perhaps the bottom line, or for what it might be a bit complex, the ones that aren't adding value to that $13 billion valuation, They basically, from what I understand, again, the people, someone might sense check me here, but from what I understand, they've been siloed. They've basically been kept to the side because they're not adding value to that major valuation. And so that valuation, that $13 billion business is being sold as it is. And there's all the other parts, which are quite lucrative, quite valuable parts to the business, your open bets, your IMG arenas. There's probably other parts of the business that I'm missing. There's Endeavor Streaming will be part of that. All those other parts, they aren't essential to that $13 billion valuation, and so will be probably quickly moved on and sold off to clear the decks, basically for the original owners. And that's probably why basically IMG Arena sale happened as quickly as it did. They decided when they need to get that off the books, there's probably some consolidation that needs to happen, and it looks like they decided to get rid of those rights. There's a huge liability on rights, and that's why the money's going the other way a little bit. There's a commitment there that's been made. But inevitably, Sportradar, who's now the ownership, will probably have to do some serious consolidation. That could be people basically letting go a lot of people, could be technology issues, whatever. And that money is going to help probably pay off some of those costs that are coming their way. And basically they take on the liability of that. So it's a long way to get to the point, but hopefully that paints the picture. Chris, tell me if that makes sense, or if I sort of lost you along the way.
No, it almost makes me think a little bit sometimes like a football transfer, particularly like a loan deal where it's like, yes, we're going to give you this player, which seems really positive that you're going to get a really good player, but the trade-off is you're now going to have to pay his wages. So that's what it almost sort of to the point where you're like, oh, why is someone actively paying for someone to take something away from you? Well, it's because that person on the other end is then going to have to presumably be the one that makes up the payment to those rights holders. So I get the point where on the surface, it's like, oh, wow, they were paid to take this on. Well, that doesn't necessarily come free of costs. So I think for me, the other side of it, you mentioned Genius Sport, you mentioned Stats Perform. How does this now help Sportradar perhaps compete in this space, as you say, or we were kind of talking about some of the sheer bulk of the rights that IMG Arena have? This is going to be a competitive space. So for Sportradar, how does that help set them up going against their key competitors?
Yeah, a good question. I think there's a couple of things. One is that I nerded out a little bit into the Sportradar Investor Day decks, trying to get a sense of what their trajectory is and what their growth strategy is, and they're doing incredibly well. The Sportradar have really they've got north of $1 billion of revenue for the year. They're projecting growth. I think the number is, I should have written this down, but something like getting up to 1.7 billion, I think, by 2027 or 8. I really should be more prepared for these things rather than speculate. But about that level, actually, I think it might be in the article that was put together by Josh, actually, on the Sports Pro website. So it's got a bunch of numbers in there, so I won't just regurgitate those. But they're basically, in short, they are profitable. They're in a good position, and they see themselves growing the trajectory. And one of the ways that they have that growth trajectory is they have a full suite of services, right? And they can be technological, they can be very betting centric, they can also be marketing platforms allowing sports to be able to target more wider fan bases. There's a lot of like predictive AI tools, which we had actually on stage at one of our events last year, basically helping sports properties in particular, but also media platforms who are leaning into the betting space, but not just betting, but they help them provide more value to audiences and generate more income. So what I could see, and your question about the IMG Arena opportunity, is they will be able to go to those partners, particularly ones they are not working with, and say, hey, we have all this suite of other stuff that we can help you with. You're already a partner of ours. We're already working together. We think we can help you drive more revenue in this area, this area, and this area if you work a bit more closely with us and take a look at these opportunities that we've got for you. And that's a much easier thing to sell when you're already working together than it is if you're starting from scratch and you're one of those tech vendors out there trying to sell something to someone who's not spending a dime with you. So that's really, I think, the big opportunity why they've done it. Markets always need a bit of consolidation. I don't think the betting industry is any concern. I think it's only going to continue to go from strength to strength. Some of the features that I saw Sportradar presented are just really cool. They're using a lot of AI tools in there, both for like basically helping bettors to make decisions in a way that is not, it's very, very relaxed. It's using generative AI and so that is always a topic, but I've seen some examples of it. It looks really cool. It makes a lot of sense why people would want to use it practically. So I think it's going to be really additive to whoever they work with, and the more clients, the more they can build out that proverbial share of wallet from every single client they've got.
Well, you just touched on it kind of flying through, but I'll bring back to it and make you go a little bit deeper on it. And you sort of said you're not concerned about the state of the betting industry, where maybe the question could be, all right, well, if it's such a profitable part of the business, or it's going to be such a hot market, why would Endeavor pay somebody to take it off of them? So
Sure.
if the reaction is if it's as good as you say, why are you paying to get rid of it?
Great question. Chris, you're good at this. Jeez. So a couple of things to go back to it is because of this major Silver Lake investment. They basically sold off the bulk of the Endeavor business. They've sold it off, right? They are basically saying, look, we've done the deal we need to do. We've cashed in. These other businesses, we're not going to hang around for years to build these out and hope we can build the business we want. So we'd rather give them to someone who sell them to someone who wants them, cash in more money because we've already cashed out. Made a huge amount of money from this existing deal, within the TKO sale. Yeah, basically a lot of these investments were to grow the pie, were bankrolled off the fact that UFC's been such an incredible investment for them all those years ago, and that's been funding a lot of this. So they don't have the incentive or motivation to play the long game with these businesses. They want to basically probably move on as quickly as they can and sell them for what they can sell them for right now. So basically, there's no appetite to keep those businesses in their current business, but you'll see them. My guess is you will see them quickly pop up as part of other major businesses, all those other strands, very, very quickly over the next 6 to 12 months. I think that'll be a really primary focus of the leadership there. I think the chap's name is so Ari Emanuel has basically stepped into like a chairman role of that business, and Patrick, what is his name? The guy called Patrick. He's basically running the business now moving forward. That's a high quality. That's it. Patrick Whitesell. He's been working with Ari Emanuel for quite some time on the business, but he's basically stepping up in the CEO role and he's taking on the responsibilities, I think, of basically sorting out the ship and closing the doors and the rest of it and cashing in what he can on those last few assets.
Well, that brings us back to the beginning when we're talking about watching Entourage. As far as I'm aware, that's the same Ari Emanuel that the character's based off of. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the TV show, Nick. But
he spoke at one of our Sports Pro Live events many years ago, right at the earlier stages of his. He just recently acquired the IMG business, so full credit to him. He's a tour de force. I think have I shared it on this pod where there's an incredible interview with him where he is interviewed by Bloomberg live on their channels, and he's doing an interview where he is on his treadmill in his office with the camera and the monitor right there. So clearly I think he has meetings on this treadmill constantly. And so he's having a walking meeting on Bloomberg TV. It's quite comical to watch. You should, anyone bored at home or at the office, go check out Ari Emanuel on a treadmill talking to Bloomberg. It's just quite amusing to see him in action.
That seems very true to the book or the TV show character as well.
Big time. Yeah, big time.
So the last one we're going to talk about today, Nick, and this is where I said we were going to give one of our colleagues a hard time, and that's Steve McCaskill for the way he has illustrated his point here. He's talking a little bit about the MLS. One of the things that they spoke about, their CTO was at Sports Pro New York, talking about agentic AI, which, Nick, you can explain for me because there's so many different AIs. Now I'm still trying to get it there. And then Steve has described it as in the hopes of MLS's new mobile app using this new AI, leveraging some of the tools of Apple, that they're going to deliver bidirectional direct-to-consumer relationship with their global fan base. I'm not 100% sure what bidirectional direct-to-consumer means either. So, maybe we'll bring Steve onto the next podcast for us. But Nick, if we do simplify down from some of these more simple terms, layman's for, myself, when we're talking about agentic AI, we're talking about what MLS is looking to do, how that app is going to hopefully take them forward, and how they're going to use Apple to help do this. What do you take from all of this?
Yeah, I still don't really know what was meant. I've looked into what agentic AI is. Basically, I think it's just an evolved term for the same stuff we've already been talking about for some time. It is the use of AI in platforms, in tools, basically, but to give kind of the AI the remit to kind of make decisions on what it does to serve things better. So rather than, quite often you would hear a blurring when people talk about AI, machine learning, and just setting a whole bunch of criteria and rules to follow. The idea is that I understand it to be. And again, if we've got any listeners who want to just call me out, then please do so. I'm all for it. All for an education. It basically allows the AI to kind of make its own decisions, to create decisions on the content that's being created, how it's targeting audiences, what sort of tools it's even using, the reporting. Like it's become part of your content team effectively, and they're using that to. I mean, obviously there must be some parameters in place. I don't know how they do that thing. That's like an area that's above my pay grade or knowledge grade, but they basically allow the AI to kind of have the dynamism to ebb and flow along the way. So it's not just like personalization. It could change the whole construct of the app and the platforms that it's involved with if they deem that it's necessary. If basically the engagement's really poor, they're like, all right, well, we're going to just change this, and the AI will get to work and just do it. Which just sounds pretty cool. I have no idea what was a bidirectional D2C is. I can only think it's something to do with basically you're serving content through, say, the MLS to its fans, and fans can serve content or place content on that platform. So therefore, there's content going both ways. But your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, I'll leave it to Steve to explain it. I think the thing that's interesting with MLS and Apple is we've sort of talked about this as kind of a test bed for Apple. That MLS might be proof that they should go all in on sports, or it might be proof that they should just kind of stick it out to the side. But we've always said if there's anyone that can help the MLS deliver on these things, Apple is certainly the partner to do that. So I will be curious. I'm not a big enough MLS fan, but maybe I should download the app just so I can speak on. I remember when TikTok first came out, I had to download TikTok just so I could feel comfortable speaking about it. So I don't think I've ever come across a sports app, Nick, that I was just like, hell yeah, this is the one. It usually just serves its purpose. I've never maybe spent as much time on a platform as I maybe should.
Well, here's a quote that comes from the article itself that Steve wrote, which is from the CTO of the MLS. His name is John Nicastro, and he said, agentic AI isn't just putting content in front of you, it's also measuring the engagement and learning through that process. The model penalizes itself if you're not engaging with the content. But if the content does engage you, it rewards itself through reinforcement learning and will try other content. So basically, it's patting itself on the back along the way by the sounds of it. Instead of personalization, we'd like to call it contextualization, because we're trying to get into the fabric of human emotion. We're trying to see if you're happy or if you're sad. Are you engaged in some kind of sporting event that just happened because you lost or because you won? If you lost, then we might capture that sentiment and remind you of the good times and serve up a highlight of a victory or a clip of a player doing something special. I love that. It's basically, if you feel down, we're going to make you feel better. Thanks, AI. So yeah, look forward to seeing that in practice. I'll definitely be downloading it and giving it a go and seeing if, I don't know, it can make me feel better when I'm a bit down one day. I'm not sure how it'll read that off me, but I'll try and work my magic somehow.
I'm just sat here trying to think as a Bengals fan if there's anything that could make me feel better. I've known nothing but pain for 35 years.
Is there a Cincinnati MLS team?
Yes, they're actually quite successful given they are one of the newest franchises. We've come very close. It's going to be really funny if Cincy FC becomes the first major league team in Cincinnati to win a championship since 1990. It'd be funny if they're the first ones to do, because they've only had a team in the MLS for 4 or 5 years now, but they are actually quite good.
Well, there you go. I didn't realize there's so many teams out in Cincinnati. Are you on board? Do you have a jersey or a shirt?
So I did manage to get to go to a game the last time that I went home. I would say, and I will say this, and people in the UK can get mad at me, Cincinnati has a better environment than pretty much every Premier League game that I've ever been to, bar, except for when I went to Leeds United. Leeds United is a great football club, great atmosphere. But I went to the Cincy FC game. It is very reminiscent of kind of Bundesliga. For anyone that's watched football or pays attention, Bundesliga, they've got the drums. They're constantly going throughout the whole game. Premier League, just to be honest with you, it's not. It can be a little quiet sometimes, but great atmosphere. Brand new stadium in the west side of Cincinnati. Has done a lot to rebuild that part of town. But yeah, if you're in Cincinnati, Nick, like I said, you could spend a weekend in September. You go to a Reds game, you go to a Bengals game, you go to a Cincy FC game, spend the whole weekend, all sports. And they're all actually located downtown, which is a bit rare in America. Quite often, the joke is the New York Jets and the New York Giants don't even play in New York. They play in New Jersey. All three of the stadiums are all located in downtown Cincinnati. So you can actually walk to all three pretty conveniently.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I always wonder when you talk about the drums bit, right? I always wonder when you see those, there's always someone at most American venues who's like a
super fan.
Super fan. They're all on the screens, or they're always doing something to spark the crowd. I just wonder how much the club has an involvement with that. Or is it just someone who's like, you know what? There's like 50,000 person stadiums. Like, I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to be the one that banging the drums. Or actually, is it like recruited by? I could just picture like the NFL teams going out to all these high schools or colleges and go, we're looking for a really good drummer and who's a bit of a nutter for sports. Anyone want to sign up and like give him a season ticket, give him a little wage, and they're just such a driver of the atmosphere at some of those stadiums if they're playing the right role, right? Or there's a few of them doing that role. So I don't know. I'd love to know if anyone knows that. That'd be good to know.
Well, we need to figure out, not to go too off piece at the end here, because the one that always sticks in my head is the New York Jets. They used to have Fireman Ed. He was one that used to always Jets.
Yes.
He was that guy. But I think this is where I think the teams aren't involved, because I was reading some drama that I think he thinks he's more important than he is. And he got really upset about he wasn't invited to some event or his season ticket got something like that. So I don't know how much they are or they aren't, but hopefully we can find someone out there and give us an answer, because surely there's value in it.
Yeah, there must be some value. I actually remember my first ever NFL game was the Jets versus the Texans at Meadow Field.
Before, yeah. You're talking about the old stadium or the new stadium?
Yeah, it was the old stadium.
The Meadowlands.
Yeah. The Meadowlands. Yeah, I knew it was a Meadowfield. Meadowlands. And they kept showing that guy on the TV on the big screen. I'm like, who is this guy? Why does they keep showing him? He just kept cheering all the time. And then it turned out that, he's like the guy that everyone basically watches. And as soon as he starts cheering, everyone gets behind him. That was my first experience of seeing that type of fandom, or that type of fan playing such a leader. But the thing is that they could just probably bring in someone else and just keep showing him on screen. As long as they're going nuts, then that will probably have the same effect. So maybe he needs to keep him in his lane a little bit. It was also a very boring game. It was like with the Texans, David Carr, I think. Was it Derek or David? David Carr. Against, was it Chad Pennington? Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, that's about 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, Nick, it was another great episode. You and I, not to pat each other on the back, but just always a good time getting to hang out with you. It's a Friday. It's only a couple hours away till 5 o'clock, and 5 o'clock on a Friday, gonna have a cold one. So yeah, it's just been a great way to wrap up the week.
Absolutely. I'm definitely looking forward to cracking my first Friday afternoon beer. It's been a good week with the sun shining out here and enjoying taking in some fresh air. But thanks everyone for listening in. And if you want more information on the investment event, don't be afraid to reach out to me. I can give you more details before we actually officially launch it. So this is like a bit of a pre-launch launch. So exciting times to come. But thanks everyone. Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as SportsPro Nick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, Stream Timers. Until next time.